like just the hottest, just so sexy.
Hello and welcome to SyrupCast episode 8. We have survived the launch of MobileSyrup 3.0, and with me to talk about SyrupCast 3.0, actually MobileSyrup 3.0, and the rest of the SyrupCast topics today are Douglas Soltis. Hello, sir.
Worst redesign ever.
And our loveliest new employee and writer extraordinaire, Jane McIntegart. Welcome back. Hello. Are you there? Uh-oh. Jane is having technical difficulties.
She froze with the not the most flattering facial expression. So she's worked for us for like a month, and in that time has been on vacation for like 4 weeks.
Sorry, you guys just completely dropped out. So you guys called me lovely and then went away, and then you came back and were like,
yeah,
she was on vacation.
Yeah, while you were gone, you said some pretty terrible things.
Yeah, we accuse you of being on vacation and of writing a lot and of being a generally genial person. So yeah, suck it.
Far too genial.
Well, that'll change.
So,
in a few more weeks.
How are you guys? So we went through a pretty harrowing day yesterday with the launch of MobileSyrup 3.0, and we got a lot of feedback, some of it graciously positive and most of it not. So before we get into the tech stuff, let's talk about it for a bit, because I know a lot of our listeners are going to have opinions on the site, and we just want to kind of touch base and acknowledge that there are some things that we're still going to work on, and we've come up with a big list of stuff that's going to change. Some of it is going to stay the same but get better and get generally easier to read, but we do hear you, we do understand, but we think that the direction is where MobileSyrup needs to go. So that's kind of where we are. What do you think? Jane, what do you think of the design? Obviously, you're not going to speak negatively of it, but you know, is it working for you? Be honest.
I think knowing what I think I'm on the inside of it too, so I have a different opinion than any of the readers would have. I like it. I think it's fresh and I think it's exciting, but obviously there are some changes that need to be made and some things that need to be cleaned up. But I think overall, it's for the most part where we want it to be. We just need to tweak it so that shit ain't broke.
All right.
And then it will be good.
So let's get on that. Doug, you made a schematic today of what we envision the redesign to be, and we appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we take reader feedback really seriously at MobileSyrup. So we definitely and we knew there was going to be a lot of feedback because there were a lot of changes that we were making, and a lot of things. The kernels of things implemented that are not yet fully implemented, but we needed to kind of get out and live to then iterate on. So we wanted to see kind of where everyone was at. And as you said, a lot of it there was a strong amount of it that was positive, and then there was a lot of it that was constructive in the criticism of things that we knew were going to be issues, but seeing to the extent that they were. And, you know, we've gone through, compiled all that, matched it to our issue list and our roadmap, and you know, we're going to prioritize some things higher than others based upon the feedback. But you know, I get what it can be like for readers to go to the site that they see every day and see totally crazy, extreme differences. But we knew that was going to happen, and we're aware of the things that you are going to find sticky, and we're working on it. So I think each day they come back, they're going to see the site be just a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to talk about. That's something that we had in mind from the get-go, that unlike the previous design, which stayed static from the day it was launched until yesterday, the new SyrupCast, I keep conflating that, sorry, the new MobileSyrup is going to be a living product, and as a result, we're going to see constant updates, constant iteration, and we're going to have a more permanent way for people to give us feedback, and I think that'll be good for everybody. So, yeah, thank you again if you've given us feedback. We do listen to it. We can't respond to everybody, and that's our PSA. So let's get right into the topics at hand. And yet, last week, Doug and I spoke about regulatory the regulatory situation in Canada. We talked about Rogers and exclusivity agreements, and it was really heavy and technical on the Canadian wholesale wireless market in general. This week we're going to talk about hardware and make it a little bit more exciting. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on upcoming devices and compare them to what devices are on the market today. And we're going to start with the Galaxy Note 4 because we know probably more about that than any other phone out there or potentially coming out there in the next month. This is going to launch on September 4th at an Unpacked event in Berlin at IFA. And what is going to be different? Well, it's going to have a higher resolution screen. It's going to have a much faster processor, blah, blah, blah. This comes every year. What does the Galaxy Note 4 need, though, aside from better specs to be a truly competitive phablet in a market that Doug and I have acknowledged many times in our tete-a-tete is moving down. The price of phablets are dropping quickly, and they're actually, the trends show, are replacing tablets. So, Doug, what is Jane, what does this need?
I think this is something that I think it gets ignored all too often. I know Samsung is working on it. I think that, especially now that we've reached a point where the flagship models are so powerful, and the mid-range phones are what we would have called flagships, even a year ago. I think battery life is super, super important, especially for larger screen phones. And I know that Samsung is doing a lot with their Exynos to make them more power efficient, especially for high resolution displays. But I think Samsung said, I think it was in 2011, that they're not just about making bigger batteries, they're about making more efficient batteries and improving battery efficiency in other ways as opposed to just adding more. And I think that that's something that users don't need, more cores, more RAM, to an extent even more storage, because we have so many different online solutions. But what people really need is for their device to last all day. So
yeah, but didn't the Galaxy Note have no issue lasting a full day already? I mean, they had one of the bigger batteries in the market in the last generation.
Yeah, I know. I still have problems. I mean, the Note that I used, I still found myself, okay, well, don't listen to music on your phone all day because that's gonna affect things, and I would find myself switching devices specifically so I could save power. So
yeah, what's interesting about this Note, so the Canadian market will most likely get the Snapdragon version of the Note, but the Galaxy Note that's going to be released all over the world will come with Samsung's newest 20 nanometer Exynos processor, which is really interesting because it's based on a...
Is it the 20 nanometer, or is it, because the 20 nanometer is the 5430, and I think the specs that leaked just today that it was the 5433.
It's the 5433.
Yeah, and they haven't talked about the specs for the 5433 yet. I presume they will do that on September 3rd.
Yeah, but I mean, you can infer that if it's of the same generation, I mean, we're talking about the 30 series. It may be a more powerful version of the device, of the chip that's in the Galaxy Alpha, which we'll talk about in a second. But this device will have no shortage of power. It may even have 4 gigs of RAM. Although somebody, when we posted that article earlier today, pointed out to me that the 805 and the 5433 are probably 32-bit chips, and the addressable memory range of a 32-bit chip is 4 gigs max, and it's usually only 3 gigs because you need some overhead. So it doesn't sound like the Note 4 will actually have 4 gigs of RAM, or if they do, it won't be used in its entirety. But does that even matter? Doug, do you think that something like this needs 4 gigs of RAM? I mean, that's pretty much what a laptop has.
Okay, so I know you guys really get off on this stuff, and there was a time that I did too, I couldn't care less about the specs. I care about performance and kind of like what Jane was saying. I care about how long that performance is sustained, right? So I only care if it's 4/3 if I see a notable jump in either the speed of the device, the quickness in which apps load, a lack of like crashing or issues with that, or if I can use it all day without the battery going to dust. So, for me, these specs are really great, but I'm wondering how well, if a lot of this stuff is off the shelf, how well this device can take advantage of those specs and Android 4.43 to really be any different than any other Note or Android device. Like, are we going to see in the specs a performance difference, or is it just going to be, a new model? Oh,
So
we have a new caller.
we have a new we have a new entrant in the SyrupCast world. Welcome, Ian. Oh, he's still loading. So yeah, I agree with you there, and somebody pointed out when we wrote about the Galaxy Alpha yesterday, which is Samsung's first all-aluminum frame device, that I said that because it only had a 720p display and only 2 gigs of RAM and this new chip and whatever and an only 12 megapixel camera, that it's mid-range compared to the current crop of high-end Android phones. And they said, well, how can you say that when you always praise the iPhone for its performance, even though it only has a dual-core processor and 1 gig of RAM? And I wanted to respond by saying that you cannot compare iOS to Android, and you have to compare different devices across the Android ecosystem, because iOS was designed to take advantage of lower RAM counts, and the dual-core processor, the A7 inside the iPhone 5S, is actually faster than every single Snapdragon 800 level processor, and its graphics capabilities are far superior than any Android device until the Shield, the Tegra K1 was released recently. So we're talking about apples and oranges here, and you can't compare the two.
So for me,
Ian, welcome.
Hi. How are you?
Joins.
So Doug, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so for me, the two specs that stand out, and I will say that an aluminum body is more interesting to me than maybe the specific hardware specs, because that relates to build quality, which has a greater impact upon your device experience more than a chipset almost. But for me, the two things that stood out was the size of the screen and the megapixels of the camera, which are, how big is this thing? Like, this thing will not fit in any article of clothing that I own.
No, that's not true.
Fairly tight. I rock the skinny jeans, man. This is not sitting in my front pocket. But then I'm also interested in the camera. And that might just be my use case. Like, I'm not a phablet guy. I doubt I will ever use a Note, because it's just, I'll carry a smaller phone and a small tablet around with me than use this device. So maybe I'm not the one to get by. But I think you're entirely right that the specs have to be greater than the sum of the individual, and we won't know that until we get our hands on it.
Yeah, and I think we say that about every Android phone when it first comes out. It's faster than the last generation, but the diminishing returns are palpable these days. You can tell that the OEMs are really trying to push other features aside from speeds, because Android is a pretty fast OS, and the limitations it has at the high end are the same limitations as it has in the low end, and you're experiencing the same slowdowns on a 2.5 gigahertz quad-core processor as you are on a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core processor, because Android itself was not designed the same as iOS. So you still have those issues with scrolling, you still have those issues with lag, you still have those issues with app fragmentation, and those aren't going to change until Google gets their act together. And I think with Android L, they have definitely made that push, but we'll see later this year whether that has an impact on devices outside of the Nexus ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's like, this is the kind of thing where, like, if you're going to buy a new phone, you obviously want the most future-proof phone possible. but then you're buying this phone hoping that an Android L update is going to really take advantage of the advanced specs, because otherwise it's just sitting there, right? Although the commenters on the post that you had done seem pretty hyped. I'm seeing a lot of take my money and boner, so they're obviously excited.
Boner is usually an indication of excitement.
Shout out to Ronnie Raygun 1.
What's up? So Ian, you've been an iPhone guy for a while. Do you think there's anything that could make you switch to a Galaxy Note?
The Note for me is too big. Even this can be 5.7 inches. It's way too big. I think I like a smaller display. I think the largest display that I've had was a Galaxy S4 or Galaxy S5, right? And I felt that was too big for what I do. I don't watch any TV. Occasionally I watch YouTube, but I just do email. I surf the web. That's it. I don't know. Like, I'll have to take a look and see. But I have been an iPhone guy for a very long time.
Well, I mean, that brings up a good point, right? The Galaxy Note, this is the first year that it seems like the Galaxy Note is not increasing in screen size. The first one was 5.3, the second one was 5.5, the third one was 5.7. It looks like we're increasing this year in screen resolution. We're going to 2560 by 1440, which is QHD or Quad HD. But there's no increase in screen size, and it actually might be a smaller device because, like LG, they tend to try to shrink the bezels around the screen to get a more compact chassis. So that could be actually an advantage to people looking for a slightly smaller device, and Samsung finally acknowledging that they can't keep increasing their phones ad infinitum just to keep pushing this idea that bigger phones are better.
Right.
Well, what happens when they make it the size of a Galaxy Tab?
Well, they already have. The Galaxy Mega is basically a slightly smaller Galaxy Tab.
I don't believe that phone actually exists. I believe it only exists on the internet. I've never seen it in the wilds. I don't expect
huge. And you can put it to your face like this.
We went to this. We went to the conference when it launched, and they had it sitting next to a Galaxy Note, and it made the Note look like a Galaxy S4 Mini. It was really small.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, like the Mega was enormous, and it's really not a practical phone. But I have seen people on the streetcars using one. It's quite amazing.
But using it as what? Like,
as a phone.
As a phone?
Well, as a communication tool, I guess. Nobody really uses it as anything as a phone anymore. How many phone calls do you make a day, Jane? 1? 2?
Not very many. No. Probably less than 5 for sure.
Right. I don't make any phone
more
calls.
Than average, I would say. Yeah.
Is that because no one calls, or you don't call?
Yeah.
Shut your face, Daryl.
I have my number on all the bus stops, but nobody rings.
I know. I was making a joke.
Shout out to Daryl.
Yeah.
And his new puppy. Okay, so do we want to talk about a phone that we all expect to get bigger, but in possibly a more rational way?
Yeah, so I was going to say, Ian, you're saying you like your small screen phones. Doug, you're an iPhone user as well. What do you think about this potential increase in iPhone size? We're looking at a September 9th launch for the iPhone 6. May even be 2 models with a 4.7 and a 5.5 inch. Does this excite you? Does this frustrate you that Apple's finally succumbing to peer pressure in a way? Doug, what do you think?
I wouldn't say it's peer pressure. I think it's the market getting to a point where the education and the expectations have kind of settled, where people are okay with, we're 5 years from the idea where a touchscreen device was insane, right? Where a device that didn't have a keyboard wouldn't make any sense. So the idea that we're now hitting a point where we exploded in growth, that bigger, more screen, and now, as Jane was saying, it's more about sticking to a size and getting better performance out of that. I think it's a perfect time. Apple does things when the holistic experience is good for whatever they're trying to do. They're not going to do anything based upon a spec. So I am interested to see their take on a larger iPhone. I wouldn't mind a bit more space, but I know they're not going to release something that's larger just for the sake of it being larger, but because they've figured something out. And I also hope that they keep the options limited, simply because one of the biggest benefits of iOS for development purposes is the fact that there's so few screen sizes that developers can really take advantage of. And as you said before, Daniel, that the OS is really pared down to really work with a small amount of devices. And the more that they break that out, the more compromises that happen. So yeah, I want to see what they're doing. It's probably going to be bigger. It's going to be a little bit sexier. But I don't think it's going to be just because. I think it's because we're like, oh, we figured out an aspect ratio that works. We figured out a thickness that works for this size. I'm expecting it to fit in one hand comfortably in a way that most Android phones don't.
Boner.
Boner, take my money.
Boner.
It'll be interesting to see how they remarket that, because remember when the iPhone 5 I think came out, or whenever it was, they said you can use it with one hand. It's the easiest thing to use in one hand, and that was the 4-inch display, right? So now with a 4.7-inch, I wonder how they're gonna. This is even easier to use with your one hand.
No,
right?
they can't say that. I mean, they know physically that even the 4-inch phone, you have a 4-inch display. It's kind of hard to reach the top of the screen with your thumb. You have to readjust your hand. With a device like the LG G3. Oh, cool! It's like
Meta. Oh.
So with a device like this, you even though this is probably the most compact 5.5-inch display on the market, you cannot reach it without really struggling. So if Apple ever decides to release a 5.5-inch phone, which has been heavily rumored, then they're never going to be able to say that it's a great one-handed phone anymore. They're going to have to change their marketing message to say that it works best in two hands and that you can get more done with two thumbs.
More space and
whatever.
More screen real estate, and bigger is better. And
well, yeah, they're always going to have the marketing that's going to be prepared with it. But I'm really interested in actually how that changes the experience and the comfort. Like, as I said before, with the Alpha, the build quality matters way more to me than screen size. And if it's taking advantage of everything that they've put into iOS, if it's crazy fast, if the enhanced size allows better battery life because they can just jam something in there, or just something keeping up with camera advancements is a big deal. Like I first started choosing iPhone because of the camera, so that's a thing. But I think we know it's going to be. I don't think it's going to blow anyone's mind, but I think it's going to be on par.
I think it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I think it is going to blow people's minds. I think that there's a lot of features that we don't know about, and I think the fact that if it's anything like Marcus Brownlee's demo of the Sapphire screen that he got that was purportedly directly from the production line, that is absurdly strong, and it'll make things so much better for people, because how many people around Toronto do you see every day with broken iPhone screens actually still using them? I mean, it's insane that people still use their phone when their device is dangerous to them.
And that goes back to, I was just looking at the comments on the Note 4 post, and I think it goes back to what Doug was saying about the specs don't really matter so much anymore. It's more about other improvements they can make to the device. So yeah, the super strong Sapphire glass, but then two people on the Note post, who I assume don't know each other, said that if they added waterproofing, that they would buy it. Mm-hmm. So it's like different things are becoming more important to people, because once the specs level off at like a certain level of performance, they don't care anymore, and it's more about like the software, or how the phone is going to be protected every day, or how well they can use it with one hand.
Yeah, I have to say that when I got the Galaxy S5, I wasn't super impressed, and then I slowly over the course of a few months came to realize that the features that they added, like the waterproofing, were really, they were real life benefits that you actually care about. Like being able to use it by a dock and not having to worry that if it falls in a lake, it'll die. Like that's a huge advantage over most phones on today's market.
So are you saying that the Galaxy S5 is your life's companion?
No, that was the Galaxy S4.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, they took that one away. But yeah, it turned into an ugly dog of some sort, like a companion, but you don't really want to acknowledge it.
It's more of like a long weekend companion than a life's companion, but
Was it
That's
was
right.
it Samsung who had their ad campaign for? I think it might have been the S4. Was that it was they had like a life-proof ad campaign, and it was like people on pools and camping and stuff like that. I can't remember if it was Samsung, but yeah.
Yeah, they were jumping.
Yeah, they're always jumping and
happily jumping.
So let's talk about iOS 8 for a second here, because iOS 8 has been accused of copying Android in many ways, because it's bringing third-party keyboards, it's bringing extensions which allow apps to talk to one another. Doug's looking like he's about to die of frustration. So let's talk about it, because there's no question that Apple's development platform is far ahead of any other. That there are developers themselves who are willing to talk to me.
Everyone.
No, like.
Sorry. Could someone ask me how many fucks I give?
How many fucks do you give? How many fucks do you give?
Nary a fuck do I give.
Why nary a?
Because it's about the experience. It's about how everything works together. It's about, oh great, Apple finally opened it up to allow third-party integration, and they're going to do it in a controlled way. The stuff that they announced with iOS 8, where apps can be working together and share in a way that hopefully will benefit the consumer, will benefit developers, and won't present you what Android users are presented with when they download an app from the Google Play Store, which is a long list of all the ways in which that app wants to access everything about you, which is very scary for a lot of users. No, no. That's a thing, man. They download an app and they see, oh, it wants access to this, this, and this, and this, and this. It's very confusing. But I don't care where the features come from. I care about how they work together, and if it adds up to something that I want to use. And to really think that third-party keyboards was this game-changing super idea that no one ever had before, and Apple's copying it. It's like, no, they're like finally getting around to do it after they did all the other things right. Like that's the least exciting thing about iOS 8.
Okay, so what is the most exciting thing about iOS 8?
Well, on the developer end, it's Metal, and it's the stuff that they're doing there to just have some like hot shit tools for developers to take advantage of the new chips. But then it's just off the top of my head going back, it's the stuff that they're doing with like HealthKit and that they're creating all these little nodal points for apps taking advantage of like biometrics, Internet of Things, stuff like that to connect with. And it's the idea that they're going to make the iPhone your remote control for all the things that go on in your life. That's exciting to me. And if I also get to use a third-party keyboard that's 10% better than the stock iOS keyboard, that's great. But if someone thinks that's a game changer, like A, you're not anything more than 1% of the market, and B, like Jesus, guys.
Yeah, I think the extension stuff is interesting because the keyboard stuff is interesting because it's a public part of that extension. Functionality, but I think the fact that you can use Touch ID to enter passwords through 1Password because they're opening up both extensions and Touch ID APIs makes it probably one of the coolest ways to take advantage of real-world functionality on your smartphone. So if you think about it, Touch ID could be implemented with a Kivo lock, so that when you get home, instead of using a key, you just open up the Kivo app, which is connected via Bluetooth to your Kivo front door lock, use your Touch ID, which takes your biometric fingerprint to unlock the door. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and I don't see any Apple OEMs integrating that anytime soon.
Yeah, and I guess when we were talking about iPhone 6, the one thing that in the device I want to see, like Touch ID is a significant hardware thing for them that's separate, and I want to see how much farther they can take advantage of that. And then maybe they don't really talk about Siri when they talk about iOS 8, or they didn't before. So I'm wondering if they're maybe saving that a bit with a device. I want to see if they push that forward. But like, fuck, it took like 2 years for the iPhone to get copy and paste, and what did that matter?
Oh, it mattered.
When everyone,
it mattered.
And everyone still made a huge deal out of it.
Making a huge deal out of something doesn't mean that it matters.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Is so much about iOS in general is not like it's not notable, but because Apple makes you wait 2 years for it, and you got people like jizzing their pants over it when it finally becomes available, and it's hard to differentiate.
Jizz in your pants, first time on the podcast.
No, but it's hard to differentiate between like I guess for users especially who are not so in depth into like the news, it's gonna be hard for them to differentiate which features matter and which don't.
Yeah, but I again, to Doug's point, it's mostly the entire experience, and I think that's why iPhone users stay more loyal, because they rarely get as frustrated by the features that are not as well implemented as they do on Android, because the features that aren't as well implemented on Android are just broken. Whereas,
yeah, but I would rather have features that are poorly implemented than features that aren't implemented at all. And they're like, oh, the next version will have it in a year.
No.
That everyone gets the minutes it's available, rather than, like, you're talking about in a year. How many Android users are still waiting for a KitKat update? So don't even talk to me about that.
No, hang on, guys. Guys. This is not a matter of like fragmentation versus features. This
It
is a matter
can be.
of, like, it won't be. I'm ending the broadcast if it is. It's that's basically our comments, but like in real life.
Can we talk about Motorola?
No, but yes, in a second. But I just want to close this up, because people on MobileSyrup love to rag on Apple for a lot of things, and they say that it's too expensive, it's too small, it's too slow, they copy whatever. But in reality, when you're in the world and you look at people using their phones, they generally, and this is less significant today than it used to be because Android is fantastic at most things, but the things that people in the Apple ecosystem had to wait for, when they finally got them, they were happier with than the equivalent feature on Android. And I think that's important to note, because there's nothing that, like, yes, back in the day it didn't have copy and paste and it didn't have background, music playback. But, what does that mean today when all OSs do everything well, and the major advantage is that app developers still prefer one over the other, so the experience is by and large better on iOS than it is on Android.
No, let's put it in a different way. So don't compare it to Android. Compare it to something like Windows Phone or a BlackBerry 10, where if you go by a back-of-the-box feature list, you see a significant amount of parity or advantage on the other side. But if you ever spent 15 minutes with one of those phones, there's just going to be these little nagging things, whether it's a little bit of a hang-up, whether it's having to go 3 menu items deep on another thing, whether it's app crashing, whether it's just weird glitchiness, like a lack of smooth responsiveness. All of that is what relates to the holistic experience. Like, most OSs have the same features. It's how they're implemented. Are they implemented in a way that's easy to use? Are they implemented in a way that makes sense, that you don't have to fight the device or find workarounds to the device, or battery pull the device?
I had an interesting kind of epiphany when Drew Bamford, the designer of Sense at HTC, gave an interview over the last couple of days, because the company's launching Zoe, which is their first cross-Android app. It's to create highlight reels with photos and videos. And he said that back in the day, HTC never would have allowed him to start his own software company within HTC itself. Like, the execs never would have given him that free rein to do it. And he said that the reason the execs were like, yeah, go ahead, we're good, is because Sense as an overlay on top of Android does not need nearly as much work anymore. He said that Android by itself doesn't need to be improved upon. It's just good as it is. And Jane, you're a Nexus user. You know how great stock Android is. You know that it does most things really well, and that it's competing with Apple in almost every respect these days.
No, I agree, and I think what Doug was saying earlier on about when he was saying if you look at something like BB10 or Windows Phone, it's so much more of an issue. And when we're going to talk about it later, but the HTC one, the Windows 8 version, like, you're fighting the device, and I feel like you can have the same hardware, but it really is, it's the implementation, and it's like it can just be so bad. And I don't think I think we're beyond the point where we're comparing Android and iOS. I think it's I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses, but by and large they offer they both offer amazing user experiences, but it's the other OSs, the smaller ones that are more problematic, I think.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of those devices that has a great holistic experience, hardware and software. Doug, you brought it up earlier. Motorola is launching a couple of new phones the same day, actually, or the day after the Note 4. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about it. Does Motorola really matter in this market anymore? I mean, the Moto X was my phone of the year last year because of more about what it didn't try to do than what it did do. It was a really beautifully simple phone, and I really loved that. What do you guys expect from the Moto X Plus One or the Moto G2? Jane, are you excited about this?
I don't know if I'm excited about the G2. I mean, I was reading about the G2 earlier this week, and it sounds like it's going to be more of like a G Plus One. It doesn't sound like it's going to be the next version. It sounds like it's going to be the same version but better, but also more expensive. And I think that that takes away, for me, the most impressive part of the Moto G, which was that it balanced price and specs so perfectly. So.
Sorry.
So I think it balanced price and specs so perfectly. And if the rumors are true about it's going to cost $75, $100 more than the last version, I don't think that the improvements in the specs are there to support that increase in price, and it takes away the magic of that phone, which is that it's cheap and it's powerful enough. But yeah. So I'm not excited about the G2 at all. I'm excited about the X Plus One because I feel like they'll probably price it around the same, and it'll be like the same but better.
But is that what the market wants? I mean, Doug, do you think that I mean, given the fact that it's over a year later now, and the market has changed so much for Android, is there room for just another version of the Moto X that's a little bit bigger and a little bit faster and a little bit higher resolution, but with the same sort of general feature set, or do they have to do something radical like active notifications again?
Well, I think so. Yes, if as Jane's saying, it's always the price to feature. Like the cool thing about what Motorola is doing, or was doing, at least under Google, and hopefully you're still doing under Lenovo, is that they were trying to create a series of Android devices with a specific identity and purpose. So the extent to which they can ride that line and still achieve that purpose defines whether or not just more of the same will be enough. Because what they're able to provide in performance, it has to be based upon that price expectation, like the feature expectation. So I'm still interested. I'm interested in how those devices perform. Not interested in the device itself in terms of ownership so much. But I think they still matter because Lenovo, the biggest PC supplier in the world, is now I think shipping more phones than PCs.
Yeah, that was announced today, and that's fantastic because that means that they're just knocking down. Like these companies like Lenovo, Huawei, Xiaomi, they're just knocking Samsung and Apple down a peg in a lot of these developing markets.
Yeah, they're in a race to a bottom, but these bottom devices, in a sense where it's smart to own at that price point, where it can get you something. So again, it has to be that hands-on. We have to play with it more to see if that balance is there. But I'm always interested in the companies who are trying to do specific things with phones rather than just compile or composite a series of specs based upon what they can afford and then put it out with a dumb name. But that being said, more interested in the Moto 360.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, it's weird that Motorola's flagship hardware is a smartwatch instead of a phone, but that's because more interesting things can be done with phones or watches right now. And it just looks like just the hottest, just so sexy. It's just such a pretty. That screen, I don't know if I need it. I don't know if it's better than just a regular old watch on my wrist, which I don't wear anyways because I have a phone. But it does look, it is slightly boner. Take my money.
But it won't connect to your iPhone.
Yeah. Well, we don't know, but probably not.
We don't know, but it probably won't. So.
Ian, do you think you would ever switch to Android for a great accessory like a Moto 360?
It'll be tough to me to switch to get a watch.
Oh.
Because I'm not a watch guy, right? I dropped the watch when I got a phone.
You just dropped it on the floor and just left it there for somebody to pick up?
Just like you drop a microphone.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I'm totally looking forward to seeing what happens with smartwatches, right? Because there's been Well, the Android or the LG G watch is out, the Samsung Gear, plethora of smartwatches. It'll be interesting to see what Motorola does, and that is the nicest one.
Daniel,
so
did you
far.
see it at Google I/O?
You touched
The 360.
Yeah,
I wore it.
Yeah, so I wore it too, and I was like super excited about it before I went, and then I saw it in person, and I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of like that guy that you meet online, and then you meet him in person, and you're like, oh, he's kind of funny looking. Like he was just like it looked so hot in the pictures, and then I like saw it in real life, and I was kind of like, oh.
So do you think it's not geared to
Swipe
you?
left.
Do you think it's geared to more a male audience then, or?
Oh, for sure, they all are. Like they're all massive and ugly as sin. But the Moto 3 or is it the 360? That's what it's called. Yeah, Moto 360 is much nicer, but it's still like when I saw it in person, like this is like sort of thin-ish, or at least the design, like the two-tone gives it the impression that it's thin. But the Moto 360 is still really thick on your wrist, and yeah, it's still not like they're like, oh, this is unisex, and I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I might wear it, but I like not like anywhere nice. So.
But
I think that applies to guys too.
No, because you could definitely. I feel like if I don't know, if we went to an event or a wedding or something, and you were in a suit and I was in a dress, like you could get away with wearing the watch, and I definitely couldn't. I would look like a tool.
Yeah, think about those guys who wear those big Hublots as well. Like it is a little bit easier to get away with that for a guy, I think. But those are the considerations that happen with like wearable tech that we don't think about anymore. Because even the sexiest phones, people put in like stupid $20 plastic cases, right? Because they go in your pocket unless you're pulling them out. So it saddens me for you to say that the Moto 360 looks sexier in photo than it does in person.
But you might not think so, because the reason I liked it was because I was like, hey, that looks like something I would actually wear, which is not something that I could say about any of the other ones. And then, like, I thought the Gear Fit at MWC was really nice. Like, I thought that was a great looking device, but it was a piece of shit. So there's like always the trade-off. It seems like it's either going to look like crap or it's going to work like crap. So I don't know. Maybe I'm sure that you will love it in person because you have man wrists.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a matter of that. I think a guy looks stupid wearing a T-shirt with a big watch too. I mean, it's not a gender thing. It's a size thing, and I think the Moto 360 looked bigger in photos than it does in real life, and I think the Moto 360 looks better than the other two by a mile. And
it does. It definitely
you could easily pull it off. It's just it's also a matter of normalization, right? If you see enough people wearing something, it becomes trendy. It becomes just another piece of
and that's why I don't think size is the issue, because you see these girls wearing these like massive Michael Kors watches with the huge faces on them, and so they're not like they love big, they love chunky, they just don't like ugly.
Yeah, I don't think the Moto 360 is ugly. I think it's not as attractive as if a Michael Kors partnered with Google and created an Android Wear watch, but I think that's going to come next. I think Fossil and Omega and Belova and Tag, all these companies are in the process of creating smartwatches. They're just doing it
forever.
Okay,
We covered the Tory Burch thing. Tory Burch had like accessories for Fitbit, and I think that's the perfect solution, which is that the hardware is like the face, and then everything else is in the accessories. So Tory Burch has like wristbands that you can like put the Fitbit in, and they've got necklaces. Wouldn't that be so much easier than Fossil partnering with Google? Why doesn't Google just make like a module that can be inserted into tons of other accessories or watches?
So we kind of made this point with the Note 4 in the sense that phablets have now reached the point where they're starting to solidify around certain sizes, so then that they can do more to customize. And right now that's performance and specs, but it's not going to be like another 3 years until watches, like they can get the hardware to be small enough and interesting enough so that it does something, and that B, that they can have different form factors and sizes based upon aesthetic and demographic, rather than this is as small as we can get this technology to be at the time, right?
Right. I mean, it's significant to note that the Gear Live and the G Watch both have off-the-shelf Snapdragon 400 chips inside of them. So there are companies like Qualcomm and Intel making smartwatch specific. I mean, Jane, you pointed this. You wrote about this, that Power VR, the company behind the Rogue GPUs inside the Apple iPhone 5S, they're making smartwatch-specific GPUs that are so small but powerful enough to get the job done that they'll lower power consumption by like 50% and increase battery life the same amount. So, the next generation of smartwatches is going to be significantly smaller, or at least thinner, and last twice as long, just like phones do.
Yeah.
Right, and Intel is doing the same. Intel has like an entire wearables / Internet of Things thing going on. That they talked about at CES, but it's a problem that like if you're going to be an early adopter, it's not going to be attractive. It's not going to be fashionable. It's just going to be like essentially a status symbol of like, look what I have, and you have to look because it's in your face because it's so fucking big.
Yeah, agreed. But okay, so let's move on. To talk about another couple of companies that are struggling in the smartphone world, Microsoft and HTC. And Microsoft bought Nokia, and they are now Microsoft devices, and they're releasing a couple of Windows phones next month. And this month, on August 19th, HTC is releasing a version of their M8 in Windows Phone form. What's good? What's bad? What's pointless? Are they both stupid? Are they good products? Ian, do you even care about Windows Phone anymore? Even though there's a big update recently.
Yeah, I think Windows Phone. I think it looks good. Personally, I haven't used it very much. Do I think HTC needs to produce one? I don't know. It seems like a stretch, Like it seems like they're trying to reach for another audience to tap into. The M8 is a beautiful device. It's sexy. It's just like the M7, but better. They haven't released. What was the last device that HTC released?
Like 2 years ago.
Windows Phone. So two years.
The 8X. That's a good phone, though.
So it's been 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder what the Windows Phone enthusiasts will say. Where have you been? And now you're here? So on the other hand, it could be maybe the right time that HTC says, hey, we're the flagship Windows Phone.
Except that Microsoft now makes their own Windows phones. Like, it's basically Google coming out with a Nexus product saying, screw HTC, we're going to buy Asus and start creating our own Nexus products. And, OEMs are basically like, well, then why should we participate in these programs if you guys are going to get the features first and the specs and the best phones? So.
But it's just like Samsung, because people know Samsung. Hey, I want to get that Samsung phone, and it's Android. Mm-hmm. So HTC says, maybe, they could say, yeah, I want to get that HTC phone, but it runs Windows.
No, the problem,
that's never going to happen.
I know, that's why I said it's a stretch.
The reason why HTC is making Windows phones is because no one says, I want to go get that HTC phone. They're trying to put space in the market, right? Which is why it's like, God bless, but it's confusing because to the extent that Windows Phone devices have sold, have they been purchased because they're Windows Phone devices, or were they purchased because they were Nokia devices and the Lumia line would appeal to a certain demographic? So I wonder if...
I feel like nobody buys a Windows Phone on purpose, and that's the problem. I feel like nobody who knows anything about phones buys a Windows Phone on purpose.
Maybe it's top down from the business.
No, but that's my point. Are they being sold Lumia devices and Lumia features and like the unique coloring and the focus on the camera and things like that? And they're like, oh, it also happens to work with your PC laptop really well. Like, are they buying like? Why are people buying these devices? Are they buying for the hardware? Because they're not necessarily. I don't think anyone's buying for the platform.
Yeah.
So if no one was willing to buy an HTC Android phone, why are they going to be more willing to buy an HTC Windows phone? Are they just trying to steal? Like I'm a fan of HTC devices. I think they're like they're another company that makes. They have a design ideology. They're trying to do at least interesting things. They don't look like other devices. I just don't know. Like, are they going to expand the Windows phone market because people who weren't willing to buy an HTC Android phone are going to buy a Windows phone now, or?
But it's the same phone. So it would have to be like specifically people who are looking for a Windows 8. They're like, oh, I just haven't found the hardware that I want yet. Like I so badly want a Windows Phone device, but the hardware, I don't like. It would have to be someone who wants the M8 but wants a Windows. I don't understand. Like,
So
what do you think, I know?
I saw an interesting chart this morning. About 80% of Windows phones sold around the world are in the $200 or below price point, whereas Android kind of sits in the middle. They sell a lot of everything. They sell a lot of sub 200, 200 to 400, and 400 plus. And Apple obviously has no 400 plus or below 400 devices, so they sell old iPhones much cheaper, and then the newer devices are far more expensive. But what's really interesting is that in countries like India and in South America and in parts of Europe, Windows Phone is actually quite successful because the way that our carriers subsidize handsets or higher cost handsets don't exist there. So you're going to spend 500 euros for a high-end phone, or you're going to spend 100 euros for an entry-level Windows Phone. And until recently, until KitKat came out, high-end Android phones were really the only devices on the platform that got you a good experience. Low-end Android phones sucked. They were just terrible. And that's why Google really tried hard to optimize Android 4.4 KitKat for 512 megabyte to 1 gigabyte devices, because those cost much less. And what you're seeing now is that Android's eating away at that low-end market that Windows Phone had for a very short amount of time. So yeah, I mean, they make some fantastic high-end phones, but most of the Lumia sold around the world are, $100, and the most successful Lumia so far is the Lumia 520. So yeah, I think HTC has a chance to capture a little bit of that high-end Windows Phone market, but that percentage as a whole is so minuscule that it doesn't even matter. Yeah,
I don't know if they're going to grow the market in any way either. And I was just seeing something today on Microsoft even looking to sell like $150 non-Windows phones, like Series 30 phones, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that Nokia, what was that? The Microsoft $25 phone that you guys talked about earlier this week. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a dumb phone though. It doesn't have internet access. I think it's like a whole different kettle of fish. I don't see it being appealing to anybody outside of like the developing market or someone who's traveling and needs to make phone calls.
Yeah, the Nokia 130. And it's interesting because significant portions of the company they just garroted made a lot of phones like this.
Oh yeah.
But do yourself a favor, SyrupCast listeners and watchers, spend some time reading Tomi Honen's editorial on what went down between Nokia and Microsoft. We talked about it on a podcast a few weeks ago, Culture Club Sandwich, I believe, and he's a long-time ex-Nokia executive, long-time mobile analyst, and he just breaks it down. And there's some good reference links to see more of this stuff. But so then you're talking about the lack of a high end. So then what's going on with PureView?
PureView. Well, the PureView and PureView is that Nokia had some of the best imaging technology, some of the best imaging patents, and some of the smartest imaging minds in the world. And a lot of them, they stayed at Microsoft, and I think that they're going to continue producing some fantastic devices. It can't be overstated just how incredible the Lumia 1020 is in terms of imaging. And even though it's not the fastest phone because it has a pretty slow processor, it makes some crazy good photos. So I hope that they come out with another, PureView like the 1020, because there's a market for that.
Selfie phones? There's a market for selfie phones?
No, nobody wants to take... I mean, yes, there's a market for selfies because everybody's so freaking vain, but you don't have to market it as a selfie phone. I mean, please.
Well, if you're going to grow your market share, like at least you're offering something, like, hey, we're the phone or the platform to do this. Like,
no, the selfie phone is the Facebook phone of 2014. Seriously, nobody. I mean, every phone has a good front-facing camera. You can take a decent selfie with like with practically anything.
But no, the only people interested in the Facebook phone were tech writers, whereas I could see.
But even we didn't care.
Yeah, but I could see the average person being like, "This is the best phone for photos / selfies."
You know, a single person who would say, "Oh, I bought this phone because I wanted to take great selfies."
Yes.
There should be a phone for food then.
In the same way that people used to buy phones based upon how the keyboard felt in their hands, or that it came in a certain color that they liked. Decisions are made upon this.
Yeah, but you use the keyboard for everything on your phone, and you see that color every day. You're not going to be taking selfies 24/7. It's like the Facebook. It is the Facebook phone, because it's like you're not going to be hitting that Facebook button like every time you take your phone out of your pocket, as opposed to the keyboard, which you do use, or the color, which you see all the time.
Jane just revealed that she's not as young as she looks, because if she was as young as my niece, who's maybe a few years younger, she would be taking selfies every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think the last statistic that I read was that teens take an average of 6,000 selfies a day.
What?
So yeah, and I think they send like
one person takes 6,000 pictures a day.
I think they send on average 40 million texts per day too.
Yes.
So
and
yeah.
that pure emoji.
Pure emoji. That's the name of this podcast.
Forget pure view. Pure emoji.
That's
pure emoji phone would be. Oh my god.
Yeah, you take a photo and it just like projects a bunch of hot dog emojis onto the screen. That's the new BlackBerry Passport, guys. One big hot dog emoji.
Okay. So let's get to a phone that.
Let's get to.
Wait, I want to ask one more question about this pure view selfie.
The Superman camera or phone?
To go back to our last conversation, is anybody going to buy it? Like, okay, Doug, how old is your niece? And what kind of phone does she use?
She's in her
early 30s.
20s. Early 20s. No, she's a university student. I think she's like 21, 22.
And what phone does she use?
She uses, I believe, an iPhone.
Oh, so do you think that if someone told her, hey, you can take super awesome selfies, all you have to do is switch to Windows Phone, would she be like, hot dog, switch me over?
No, they wouldn't tell her to switch to Windows Phone. They would say, hey, this new Lumia phone takes the best photos for you to share on Instagram and Facebook and whatever. And her next concern was, does it run Instagram and Snapchat? And it would say,
what about my iMessage contacts? That's the number one complaint I hear from people who have to switch.
That would be interesting. I would have to ask her specifically. I know that that's a thing, but I think if Snapchat's there, then it doesn't matter.
Snapchat's not there.
Snapchat is not on Windows Phone. But
anyway,
But you know what is what does have Snapchat? The OnePlus One, because I'm Snapchatting you a dick pic right now. Ian.
I don't have Snapchat, thank God.
I just got it.
Oh yeah, thank you. So this is a phone that has been a little bit controversial of late, the OnePlus One. And we were pretty excited to talk about this last week, and then the company went and not only shot itself in the foot, but basically took a 12-gauge shotgun and blasted its foot right off, perhaps both feet. This is the company that came out with one of the most sexist contests we've ever seen. Jane wrote an amazing article about just how objectionable the content was. But basically, the company decided to run a contest for its few beautiful fans, where you would take a photo of yourself with an object that has the OnePlus logo on it, and then the forum members would vote on the top 50 photos. Now,
it also specified you could draw that logo on yourself too.
Yeah, well, please, ladies, no nudity. So of course, what happened was guys salivated at the mouth at the chance to rate a bunch of half-naked ladies with OnePlus logos on them, and then the company cried ignorance and said, we had no idea that people would respond like this. Of course we hadn't a clue that young men who are living on forums would want to see photos of naked women. You know? So, yeah, but this is an interesting situation, because the phone itself is fantastic. It's a 5.5-inch device. It runs Cyanogen 11, which is one of the newest versions of Android, and it's pretty much a stock version that builds on what Google has created, but adds a bunch of really interesting features. So I can draw a circle on the screen, and it will launch the camera. Things like that, little kind of features that make it a little bit of a better experience. But even Cyanogen, the company that creates the software, had a problem with this contest. So, Doug, do these antics take away from the idea of buying a phone from a company like this? I mean, you wrote the ethics of app use. Does that extend to hardware manufacturers as well?
Okay, so I would say that this was offensive on a lot of different levels, in a lot of different ways. And it's also not the first time that OnePlus has done weird things, or just really lame ways to try and attempt to promote this. Like, weren't they were like withholding invites or something before, or you'd have to share a certain amount of time. Like, there have been a few ways in which they've done weird stuff to try and promote this device. Now, where that relates to the value of the device itself, which I've been seeing you play with, and it does look, it's an interesting phone. It's pretty, and but I think you can separate the marketing a little bit from the manufacturing and the company behind it, because this isn't a situation where at the executive level, I think there's, like, as we were talking about with Tinder, where at a company-wide cultural level, there's a problem with their views on women and their value of women, whereas this is just a really stupid idea.
Yeah, like that was one thing that struck me about the spokesperson for OnePlus is actually female. So I emailed straight away and I was like, what's this about? And I think the way, like, that statement that she sent me, I don't know if she wrote it, I don't know who it came from, but the statement that she sent, I felt was very telling to what you were saying, where it is just, there's, like, basically a case of, like, there's dickheads in every company. Because she said, the ladies' first contest was a very misguided effort by a few isolated employees to do just that. So I think that it is a case of everyone, it's not a problem with the entire company, it's a problem with some people who work there. And it is important to know that this wasn't a super huge marketing effort. It was a forum contest for their members. It wasn't supposed to be this massively huge promotional thing.
Not a nationwide. It was in celebration of them. Yeah. It's a forums related stuff. So it's not like they launched a nationwide campaign around getting women to take photos of themselves.
No.
I think that would be slightly different. So I think in terms of the ethics of the type of companies that we support and things behind them, I think this is some rogue dudes doing some just not smart things in promotion of the device.
And that's one of the things that's like, I feel like women in tech and kind of sexism in the workplace, so to speak, is like so much deeper of an issue than it, and it cannot be cured anytime soon. But it is a case of people just being stupid. It's like they can be sexist all they want as long as they don't bring it to work with them, which is the issue here.
Well, they shouldn't be, but
no, I know, but I'm not naive enough to think that if you tell someone like, oh, you shouldn't do that because that's wrong, they're gonna go, oh, I had no idea. They still think that
No, they're gonna say, oh, I had no idea, but then they'll actually curse you under their breath when you leave the room. That's kind of what's happening here, and I think a lot of people at OnePlus, a lot of people in our comments too, were like, this is completely BS. It's overblown. It's a bunch of cats and that word that you use for cats and like people just blowing things out of proportion, and I think that's really not fair, because you get to tell what you get to say what's offensive, and if something's offensive to a lot of people, it's not just one person who came out and said this is a terrible contest. Tons of people were like, this is offensive to me, and you have to acknowledge that regardless of whether you think it's offensive.
Yeah, it didn't last very long before it got shut down. But I will say, I do believe that there's a difference between this kind of low-level stupidity and some of the higher-level things. And we're working on a tete-a-tete right now about just really bad marketing, really bad smartphone marketing, really bad tech marketing. And I think this is on the lower level. I don't say that this is necessarily like forgivable, but I wouldn't equate this I wouldn't say, oh, everyone at OnePlus is sexist. They're a sexist brand. I can't use their products in a way that I would have a problem with, like, within the construction of a company. Tinder just doesn't seem to respect women or value them, which is a broader tech issue. But I will say that my takeaway would be that more, OnePlus One is run by people that allow them to do a lot of really dumb things in the promotion of their phone.
Agreed. And that person or people should be let go. But the company itself, I think, is pretty sound, and it has. And what I think is so telling is that a year ago, the best cheap phone was the Nexus, and today we have an embarrassment of riches. I mean, we have devices like the Moto G, which is $180 $225 for an LTE version with 8 gigs of internal storage and a micro SD slot and LTE connectivity. Which is a great phone for less than half the price you'd spend on a regular flagship. We have devices like the OnePlus One, which are $300 for the 16 gig version, and then $350 for the 64 gig version. And a device like this would never have been $350 even a year ago. So we're making some great advances in commoditization of high-end components. And I think that OnePlus is not making much money on this. They've acknowledged that they're not making much money on this, but it's a loss leader. They're trying to get into the market. The marketing campaign, the price of the device itself, the fact that they're teaming up with a very well-known hacker-type development team like CyanogenMod speaks to the fact that they're really just trying their best to penetrate the North American smartphone market, which, as we can tell from companies like Alcatel One Touch, Huawei, is very difficult to do, but they're making their best attempts. So let's talk about that. Is the Nexus even relevant anymore? We've seen rumors that the Nexus 6 is going to be a Motorola device. It'll be 5.9 inches. We've seen early benchmarks that say that it's going to run a Snapdragon 801 processor. Do you guys even care about a Nexus? Jane, are you going to replace your Nexus 5 with a Nexus 6?
Yeah. Yes. I know that I've owned every single Nexus device that they have made. And every time they release a new one, I say I don't need it, and then I buy it. I've said that I would consider the iPhone 6 if it's everything they say it will be, but thinking about the process of switching from Android to iOS is kind of scary and daunting. And I think that I've gotten to the point, especially with the Nexus phones, where I don't care about the specs anymore because, as Doug said, it doesn't really matter. Android has reached a point where it runs well on a phone like the Nexus 5, which is a cheaper device with specs that don't measure up to any of the current flagships, and was kind of a low-spec device for last year's flagships too. So I don't care what's inside, I will buy it.
So
but why?
Is that because
stock? For stock and for the fact that the updates are fast. Right.
So that to you that is a much better value proposition than, say, a good camera.
Right. I know that you and I have many arguments over the camera on the Nexus 5.
Because it's terrible.
I would like if they made it better. They told me a while ago that they would make it better, and then they released an update, and it was kind of okay. So, no, I don't have, in general, don't have a lot of problems with the camera on my phone. I don't use the camera on my phone as my only camera. I'm not the person who threw out all their cameras once they got a camera phone. So if I want to take nice pictures. Sorry, go ahead.
So your crush at Google I/O, David, the Irish David, he confirmed that the Nexus program is not dead. In fact, that Android Silver is a real thing, though we don't know what it is, but that the Nexus program is not dead. So we know that there's a Nexus 9 or a Nexus 8 or whatever. It's being created by HTC with the codename Volantis, and we know that there is some sort of a Nexus smartphone in the works. Probably from Motorola, because LG said that they're not creating a Nexus smartphone this year. So things are looking pretty good. It's going to be a crazy busy month. We're going to be covering the Motorola announcements in Chicago on September 4th, and we will also have all the latest updates from IFA and from the Galaxy Note 4 launch on September 3rd. And we hope that HTC Windows Phone W8 does come to Canada, though it seems like it's only a Verizon exclusive for now. So are you guys looking forward to this? Are you guys going to line up for the iPhone 6 like all the other chumps in Toronto?
Yep.
Yep.
Are you actually?
I don't know. Why not? It's a.
Because you have like a life and a website and like 2
No, I
children
don't.
and a lovely wife and 10 other things that you could do before lining up for a fucking iPhone.
Or staff writers that can line up for you.
Yeah, like, well, hey.
You know what I found. You know what I found about.
Jane, you just got yourself into trouble.
I thought you were going to say, or
That's
staff
what-
writers who like need attention, and I was like, yeah, I totally need attention. It's like,
You know
no.
You know what I found about lining up though is that you can choose to line up all night and be one of the first people to get the phone, or you can go an hour after or 2 hours after and just simply walk right in. That's happened for the last couple of years.
Have you lined up before?
Yeah, I lined up overnight.
And
It
like,
crazy.
was everyone around you like were they all your kind of people, or were they like?
My
Yeah,
kind of people.
what do you mean,
Your
my kind
kind
of
of
people?
people?
No,
What
I
are
mean
you?
like, no, because I've lined up for
Oh.
embarrassing things before. I get there and I'm like, first of all, I get there and I'm like, I'm the coolest person here, and then I realize that I'm not. Like, I'm just like them, and that like lining up for a product at midnight is stupid, and you should be ashamed. And I was ashamed.
So you're calling me stupid and I should
Yes.
be ashamed and we go wallow in my self-pity?
Because you just said yourself, you can buy it an hour later.
Yeah, but
Especially if you're getting it from a carrier. There's never a queue outside Rogers.
Oh yeah, but you can get it unlocked from the Apple
No,
Store.
okay, so guys,
Anyway.
even with the 5, or was it the 4S? The 4S was still impossible to get in Toronto, as little as 2 years ago when it came out for
For how long?
quite a bit of time, like
Maybe a couple
even-
months, right?
yeah, months after. The lack of a need for a lineup is more about the fact that these devices don't change enough for people to really want to do that.
Granted, the major difference, probably why you could just walk right in, is because the 5 to the 5S wasn't a massive upgrade,
Right.
right? So maybe it might be different. Am I going to line up and buy one? Probably not, but I'm going to buy one.
But
If
we
you line up and buy one, I will never stop making fun of you.
Okay, so we've every year since the iPhone 4S came out, we've gone to the Eaton Center the morning of the launch, and we've done interviews, and we've done press, and we've taken photos, and we've seen the crazy line that links around the upstairs, and it's fun. I mean, the Apple employees make it fun, and it's kind of an interesting experience to see a bunch of nerds lining up for a piece of technology the way that they did for like a Beatles concert. I mean,
That's right.
you know, it's kind of interesting. I don't really feel the need to do that, and I think it's more for the fact that it's just a fun place to be as a journalist, to see all these people really excited about a
But that's
product and
because
an
it's
event.
fun from like an anthropological point of view. It's not fun because you're like, oh, everyone I would go because I'm like, oh, like what, to talk to the people who are doing it and be like, why are you lining up? Like,
Right.
what is the
Right.
benefit to you?
So I think
just-
you should go undercover, Jane, and line up with them, and then get a bunch of really good interviews, and then you can tell us all about it in a really
I can wear a
long
wire.
4,000 word story that you are assigned. Right.
I think you just got nominated to work the line this year.
Yeah, you just put your foot in it. Okay, well, this has been a very, very entertaining, I hope, hour or so, and thank you for tuning in. Ian, thanks for joining us. I know you had a busy day. As we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, as you didn't hear, we just acknowledged that the MobileSyrup 3.0 is a work in progress, and we're going to work very hard and do our best to answer everybody's feedback and try to find the right compromises, because we know that this is your site. This is a site that people come to every day, people love and care about a lot. So do you have anything to add to that?
Myself? No, I'm not too sure what you said at the beginning, but I echo that. It is a work in progress. We're listening to the feedback, which is probably the greatest thing that we can get, right? Because as much as we enjoy doing the news and reporting, and this is what we do, we care about what people say and how they feel when they're on the site.
All right. Well, to that end, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next Friday for another episode of SyrupCast. Thank you to Doug and to Jane and to Ian and to everybody who spent the time. All right. Talk to you later.
Boner.
Bye.
Boner.